Hello and welcome to McKinsey Live. I'm Lucia Rahili, McKinsey's editorial director and your host for this very special event. Today, the launch of the new book, The Broken Rung. It culminates more than a decade of research into working women and their career trajectories. The Broken Rung is hot off the presses today and available at your local booksellers and, of course, online. Joining us today in sunny New York are all three of the authors of The Broken Rung, Kweilin Ellingrud, Maria del Mar Martinez, and Lareina Yee. Kweilin, Maria, and Lareina have served a range of global clients in all kinds of industries and functions throughout their combined almost 7 decades at McKinsey. And they are based in different cities, too. Kweilin has lived everywhere, but she's now in Minneapolis. Maria's in Madrid, and Lareina is a longtime resident of San Francisco. But they are all committed advocates for advancing women in business and society. All three have served as McKinsey's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Kweilin currently holds that role. And all three are working mothers with working spouses, and each with 3 kids, which is kind of jaw-dropping. I have 2, and 3 is exponentially more. So they bring to this book their own experiences as working parents in high-intensity professional careers. They have made that ascent up the ladder successfully, and they're here to talk to us about how the rest of us can do the same. Kweilin, Maria, and Lareina, welcome to McKinsey Live.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you. I should also mention here that we're making our first foray into an in-person McKinsey Live today, but please do feel free to send in questions, and I'm going to try to take a selection of them as we go. Okay, let's start with some context. Writing this book has been a multi-year proposition. You started drafting it 2.5 years ago, and authoring a book is also a considerable investment of time on top of your already Herculean portfolios, as just described. Maria, before we get into the specifics of the research, talk to us about what compelled you to write The Broken Rung. Why this book and why now?
Yeah. So there's one stubborn fact that really annoyed us throughout the years, right? Which is the fact that women achieved educational parity more than 40 years ago. That's in the US, that's in Europe, right? However, they're not reaching that same level of representation at leadership positions, right? And we asked why. And our research proved that the why started much earlier than the glass ceiling. It started at something we call the broken rung. It started at the first promotions towards managers, and that compounds over women's careers. We'll share more about that. But we focused there, and then we said, look, why don't we bring the facts that we have accumulated over those 10 and more years of research on gender and talent and other areas of research. We brought those facts together, we brought our collective experience, and we also brought to life all of that with inspiring and amazing stories of women around the world. So that's what we wanted to do, and we wanted to basically create a bit of a guide for women at any stage of their careers to be informed on the facts and take action. It's the book we would like to have had when we started our careers and throughout. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. Now let's turn a little bit more to the book itself. Maria, you alluded to the glass ceiling, which is the kind of traditional conceit that we use when we think about women's ascent up the corporate ladder. The three of you refocused, as you said, on the broken rung. Lareina, tell us more about the broken rung, what it is and why it matters.
So imagine that every promotion is a step on a ladder, a literal ladder, and you're trying to reach the top. But as Maria was saying, this strange phenomenon, and it's actually not so strange, it happens all the time, which is that first step is broken. So let me put a number to it. In the United States, for every 100 men who get that first promotion, big celebration, only 81 women will see those same odds of promotion. And if you're a woman of color, those odds are less. If you're a Black woman in particular, that number is 54. And what's fascinating is in all the years, and Lucia, you and I have done a bunch of these episodes where we've talked about women in the workplace, we haven't really seen that number significantly improve in any lasting way. And so we are stuck at that level. And that disparity starts early and it continues on all the way to the top. But I think one of the things is we've explored, the three of us, in a lot of research at McKinsey, the roots of the problem. We wanted to really explore what Maria was saying, and Kweilin and I had so much passion for, is against the odds, what do you do? What are your options?
Well, let's get to that, right? So the question, as you just raised, is at minimum, how do you move beyond this broken rung and find your footing to keep ascending up the ladder? You use the phrase experience capital in the book. Kweilin, talk to us about how experience capital can change the trajectory of women's professional careers.
Absolutely. Experience capital is kind of a fancy way to say the experience, or really the wisdom, the knowledge that you learn on the job. And so as Maria described, women in developed and developing countries are outperforming men academically, but we kind of lose ground as soon as we kind of see the workforce. How do we equalize on that side? And that piece is the experience capital bit. It's worth about 50% of your lifetime earnings. So through McKinsey Global Institute, we looked at about 4 different countries around the world. And on average, half of your lifetime income is from experience capital, and roughly half is from the skills, the knowledge, kind of the education you bring to the job. And so if it's 50-50, how do we equalize and get more out of the experience capital side of things?
Okay, so we've set up the problem, we've set up a potential solution. All of these things are about like the actual practical application, right? It's all in the doing. So let's turn now to how someone would set about gaining experience capital, right? If I suppose I'm starting out my career, very practically speaking, I want to accrue experience capital. What does that mean? What do I do? Maria, let's start with you.
So I think we, as I said at the beginning, we brought together a lot of facts and our experience, and we basically think there are 3 areas that you need to focus to develop this experience capital. There's one big area, which is about really building the experiences that matter for a prosperous career. The second one, it's around continuing to accumulate skills that will future-proof your career. And the third one is making sure you're prepared for any headwinds that will come. Let me give you a bit more concrete, examples of what we mean by that, right? For example, on experiences that matter, I think we make a big push in the beginning about telling women to have exposure early in their careers to high quality, effective organizations. Why? Because those learnings, that experience capital that you will accumulate early in your career will propel you the rest of your lifetime. And what is an effective company? It's a company that will invest in you, that will give you opportunities for mobility inside the company, that will be a good company in the sense of, competing with others. It's with good strategies, with good performance. And yes, it's a company that will stretch your capabilities. And the sooner you get to that, the more you can leverage it down your career. So that's one, for example, that is very relevant for you to start having since the beginning of your career.
Lareina.
Well, if that's the experiences you need, there are also a bunch of skills. And these skills are the things you want to put in your backpack of life. They're the things that help propel and future-proof your career in an ever-changing world. So to dimensionalize that with a couple of numbers, one of the things that we know is that 12 million occupations will see a significant amount of disruption by 2030. And so take nurses, for example. That's a profession where you have actually a high proportion of women in those jobs. That's an occupation where we'll see greater demand, but it's also an occupation where we know that AI will disrupt about 30% of the activities of a nurse. So going forward, even though there will be more jobs and more opportunities in healthcare and nurses, the fundamental how you do that job changes. And what's essential is having the skills of technology. And so one of the things that we do is we link what are those future skills you need? We also talk about how every woman can be a technologist. For that kind of theme of the book of women do really well in school, in the United States, as an example, in many countries, women are not getting those technical skills and degrees as an undergraduate or even as a graduate student. But the good news is you can use experience capital to gain those skills on the job. And so just maybe one story that kind of brings it to life is we interviewed a lot of business leaders. We also interviewed Carly Kloss, who's a model. And she, 10 years ago, realized that all these amazing founders that she met, they had one skill in common. They could code. So she taught herself how to code. And then she founded Code with Klossy, which is an effort and nonprofit that helps girls learn to code early. And so if you kind of just take it from the all the way macro, you see disruption in jobs. You see technology as being one of the skills you need, and it's something that you can gain on the job. And that's just kind of the arc of one of those types of skills that we believe are so important for women.
Kweilin.
Absolutely. I think a few other things to build that experience capital. One would be to make big, bold moves. And I think framing this as a positive thing, when you feel really stretched and you're getting into a new area, we define a big, bold move as something that is a high percentage of new skills. So on average, a new job would require about 25 new skills, 25% of new skills that you didn't use in the last job. Anything more than that is a bold move, right? It's stretching you. It might be moving from finance to generative AI, for example. When we do these, and typically it's close to 3 of them that happen over a career, you're uncomfortable, but it's a great thing because you're learning so many new skills, and that will actually increase your experience capital. The other thing that was less intuitive, I think, as we were looking through the research, is to get experience in what we call the power alley. And the power alley is how your company makes money. And there's a story in the book of Jenny Abramson, who starts at the Washington Post, and her boss says, you know what, if you really want to rise in this organization, learn how we make money, go to ad sales, which was not intuitive for a business school graduate. But she learned the ropes for a couple of years and then took that experience to other roles over time. About a third, just over a third of men start in the power alley, just under a third of women start in the power alley. When you do, it's actually correlated with 20% higher income across a career. Mm-hmm. So that experience, even if you're not, staying there and taking it to other roles, is so critical.
Interesting. Okay, let's take it to the next step. Suppose I'm motivated. I'm willing to make these bold moves. I'm making these bold moves. In fact, I'm becoming experienced, as Jimi Hendrix would say. Nevertheless, life happens, right? Breakups, sick parents, kids. How do you see, and what did the research tell you as you were working on this book, about the ways that successful women manage to maintain their momentum when life gets in the way?
Absolutely. I'll describe a little bit about health. And this is such a foundational piece across an entire career, because if you don't have your health, you can't build experience capital. In many cases, you couldn't even work. And that's one of the myths, because we all know women on average live longer than men. But what we didn't realize at the beginning of this was that women actually live 25% more years in poor health. We spend more money on healthcare across that longer lifespan. And you combine that with lower average retirement savings. So I've got lower savings going into a longer period of higher healthcare costs, right? Not a great equation. And so in the book, we talk a bit about how do you be aware of some of these health risks, advocate for yourself, but also just be conscious that a heart attack might look different for a man than a woman. Those symptoms are different. And you need to advocate for yourself if you're experiencing some challenges. We talk a bit about menopause and other things as well. But then also on the financial side, I think the great news is it's a lot of benefit from moving from not very involved in your financial health to moderately involved. You don't actually need to become an expert. You just need to know a bit and be involved. And making your money work for you across a career makes a huge difference.
I love the long-term planning of understanding what you're going to need over time. The other piece of it is something that can just happen to you every day of the week and probably multiple times, which is bias. Mm-hmm. And so I think, Lucia, when you talked about this idea of the bumps in the road, one of the things that we focused on is making sure you're not surprised. You're not surprised that we live longer and often in poorer health. And you're not surprised if you hit a bias. So a bias could be everything that women are more likely to be interrupted, for men to take credit for their ideas, to experience what feel like 1,000 cuts that really add up over time on top of lower odds of advancement. And so instead of also just being surprised by that, one of the things we do is unpack what would you do? And a very simple thing is, let's say that a man or a woman interrupted you, Lucia, and that you're sort of sitting there stunned. You're like, wait a second, I was making that point. A very simple thing is that Kweilin could say, Lucia, I think you had a really good point. Could you just make it again? Because I didn't fully get that. And of course, Kweilin knew exactly what Lucia was saying, but she brought her back to the table. And so there are big things that we have to plan for our health, our financial fitness over time, but there's also the day-to-day. And what I love about this section is we cover both, as well as the big piece, which is motherhood.
I think we were really keen on tackling one that is very central to these discussions, we believe, and which is motherhood. And we framed it a bit as a wonderful moment of disruption, right? Because if you decide to become a parent, it's precious. But the truth is, as a mother, you need to understand that it might have significant headwinds, right? And it's not only McKinsey saying this, is a Nobel Prize winner saying this, it's multiple. One of the things that really was a bit appalling, frankly, is when you bring all the facts together and you see what you will be most probably facing, right? And so we took all those facts and we put them all together. And so for people to read and for understanding, what can happen. But we also took the solution angle on what to do about it. And our recipe there is a lot about preparing. Prepare before any leaves, build capabilities during leave. There's a lot of things that you would learn, including massive multitasking as a mother, and other skills. Prepare during leave, and also prepare for your strong comeback. And also be frank with yourself, and you will have to adjust a lot of things that you were doing before, and you will do different after. But I think just being conscious of what can happen and just preparing and asking for help eventually to your sponsors. It's important as well. I said the importance of a company that supports you. I think it's very important as well in this case, right? So leverage all the benefits, try to put this plan together and trust and build confidence in the capabilities you've developed as a mother that will propel you as well in the workplace.
I think there's like this urban legend that you could create an opportunity out of the disruption. One of the chapters early cites this amazing woman, Julie Morgenstern. And the punchline of the story is she started in performing arts, and she thought a mindset was, I'm in the creative industries in New York, so it's okay that I'm a little disorganized and, kind of leave things open-ended. She's on maternity leave. She has this beautiful baby girl. And as a mother will know, there's a very short window for a small infant to get out and take a walk in New York City. And she didn't have everything organized. And as she was running around her apartment to get it all organized and take this amazing baby for a walk, she lost the window. And the baby needed to eat again, and she needed her diaper changed. And she looked at this baby and she's like, kid, this isn't going to work. And she used this sort of weakness or this moment to actually hone in on her organizational skills. So much so, she pivoted out of performing arts, is a New York Times multi-bestseller author of how you organize your life and your operating model. And she's a coach to women in terms of how you manage. And so I just think there are a lot of stories, but that one is just in a moment of disruption, you don't even know. I mean, that is a bold move. That is more than 25% skill distance to go from performing arts to becoming a book writer and a speaker and a coach. So I think that there's a lot to be optimistic against the odds.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Okay, so we have actually been getting some pretty good engagement from the audience. We have an outsized audience today, a lot of interest in this topic, obviously. So let's try at least to get some of these questions in this last 9 minutes that we have together. First one is a little tricky, so I'm going to apologize up front, but it's the elephant in the room, so I feel that we should talk about it. The three of you are publishing this book at a time when DEI is kind of a charged topic and has come under considerable scrutiny, at least in the U.S. Any thoughts on the book's relevance within this context? And Kweilin, with apologies, maybe I'll lob that over to you since you're our current Chief Diversity Officer.
Sure. I think it's actually a beautiful moment to launch this book. It's even more important in a time like this to focus on the actions that women can take across their career. So regardless of whether your company is stepping away from some of their diversity and inclusion initiatives or leaning into it, focus on what you can control and different decisions, knowledge that you can have across the career.
Mm-hmm. And frankly, we decided to write this book 3 years ago. Right? This is not a book about politics.
Right.
This is a book about facts, bringing the tools for women to harness their career and thrive. Mm-hmm. And that was the purpose of the book, since always.
Mm-hmm. Okay, super helpful. Now we have some requests, since again, all of you have ascended the corporate ladder. Talk about how the framework of this book has been exemplified in your own career. So what is a bold move or a pivot that you've made along the way in your career that you feel like really accelerated your own momentum? Lareina, let's start with you.
I think that one of the things is I've been at McKinsey for almost 25 years, and I feel like I've had 5 or 6 jobs within that career. So sometimes when you think of a bold move or a pivot, you may say, oh, I need to go to another company. And that very well may be the case, or to explore the opportunities within the place that you work. For me, I think there have been many, many mistakes along the way and many learnings. And to your point, a bold move. I think for me, one thing has been actually pivoting in technology. And so one of the things that if you look at my resume, I was not a computer scientist or an engineer in college. And so everything that I've learned at McKinsey on the job with clients, doing the work, learning real time. And I'm just honored to lead a lot of our technology research and insights. And so I think, in some ways, there is the confidence that you can learn things and you can really extend yourself. The other thing I would just say is there are a lot of skills that I don't feel I had at the beginning of my career. Mm-hmm. One of the things we talked about earlier is it wasn't really clear to me how to be an entrepreneur, within your own organization. And I think that's a fancy word for initiative taking. And, over time, I think it's actually one of my hallmark strengths. And so, again, where you start and where you end up, you can actually put a lot of distance in that.
Yeah. Okay.
Shall I?
Sure.
I think, McKinsey offers you tons of opportunities for bold moves, right? And very early in your career, because you change sector, you can transfer. I did all of that. So that's why, I think McKinsey, we were discussing even before this session, it's a place that stretches you all the time. Mm-hmm. So you never stop learning and accumulating experience capital overall. I think my big move, and I did quite a bit of those in the beginning. So I moved from telco to banking and really got deeper there. So I did quite a bit of that. But I think probably lately the biggest move has been to embrace globality and just bringing my capabilities to different parts of the world and having to learn the cultures, the ways of doing things, how you get to impact with your client. I think that I'm still in the process of the stretch, but I think that's another one.
It's so inspiring to hear that you feel like you're still stretching.
Always.
Right. Yeah,
for sure.
Never get quite comfortable. Indeed, I think similarly shifted to do a lot of operations transformation work, shifted geographies at some moments. But I think the real mindset shift is around actually networking. building your network inside a company, beyond a company. And what we talk about in the book is that women and people of color tend to be over-mentored but under-sponsored. When it really comes to betting your political capital, to creating new opportunities that didn't exist before. And I think the mindset shift that I had, and it's been gradual, is to invest time to build those relationships, to open my mouth and ask for time, ask for advice, but also to set aside time to reconnect with people who I did have a connection with and maintain and grow those relationships over time.
Super helpful. Okay, very briefly, one piece of tactical advice for a woman starting her career. What's the one thing she should do? One piece quickly.
Pick a company, not just the job.
Stretch yourself.
And proactively steer across your career.
Great. Okay. Actually, that was so brief. Then we could do one more. Suppose you're a manager. Suppose you're leading a team. You're well-intentioned. What's the one thing that you could do easily to enable a woman? Well, you know, whether you're a man or whatever your gender, what's the one thing that you would lean in and do to help a woman?
There's a wonderful story in the book about Rafaela that worked very, very intensely in M&A. And they were working on a deal. And the day of presenting the final deal to the client, boss calls her and tells her, I'm sick. You need to go to the presentation and you run it. She freaked out and she did it and she shined. And that was an amazing learning moment for her. Over the years, she realized the boss was not sick that day, right? So I think there's a little bit of sponsoring. That's very important. Putting people in the spotlight and making them shine.
And I would say tough feedback, right? We've seen in the research that Lareina, Alexis, and others have led over the years, women and people of color don't get as much tough feedback. And if you compound that across a career, you don't get the same chance to grow. So I think managers can give all of the people on their teams that tough feedback in a caring and supportive way.
Direct.
We need to hear it.
Exactly.
I think the best managers and the best sponsors, when those two things come together, bet on women's potential. And so if there's someone that you believe in, just bet on their potential.
Fantastic. This has been so inspiring. Congratulations on the publication of The Broken Rung, Kweilin, Maria, and Lareina. It was so wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you, Lucia.
And thank you to our audience for being together with us. Again, you can buy this at your local bookseller. You can get it online. And we have a website for it, which is brokenrungbook.com. So check it out. You'll also be able to find a replay of this session on our website, McKinsey.com. And be sure to register for our next event in April, which is on data centers and the energy that's needed to power AI. Super timely, super interesting topic. See you there. Thanks again and be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.